Alright, hello! If you don't know me, my name is Caitlin and I'm a Midwest artist who loves to read. And if you hear noises like usual, that is my stinky dog Pistachio being a dog. So don't mind him. So last month I took a break from making videos and it was very much needed. I was able to rest and work on making pages for my webcomic, which is the topic of today's video. I'm currently wrapping up with my first long-form webcomic called Dear Samar. It's a teen-rated romance drama comic that is about a young widower who meets an artist and a relationship forms. However, each person has their own relationship baggages that they both need to overcome in order to fully deepen the relationship. The story talks about grief and loss, the complexities of love and relationships, specifically how relationships change as each person grows and evolves in their lives. I thought I would finish it up last year, but it's now shaping to finish up maybe mid to end spring of 2025. So as I'm recording this, I've made around 234 pages of my comic, and I started it back in 2021. So to me, that's a huge achievement. I'm so proud of myself for getting that much done. It's very hard, but it's also very fulfilling to make a comic. And in this video, I wanted to share some advice on how you can start your own webcomic. These are just general tips if you're considering making comics. It's not I'm gonna talk specifics about oh, if you post at this time on this website, this will give you the most traffic, or this is how you should format it so it works on this website, or how to make your own website for your comic, how other things like that. That's not the kind of video I'm going to be doing. It's just more just general tips on what you should think about when you're starting a webcomic. Here's the first tip. Number 1, make comics for yourself, not others. My first piece of advice is to simply have fun. Whether you want to make this webcomic as a hobby, or if you want to add it to your illustration portfolio, you just can't forget that aspect of having fun. I don't mean to sound discouraging, but there's a lot of elements to comic making that are simply not fun. It's incredibly repetitive, time-consuming, and just the end of the comic just always seems so far away. Making comics is quite different from making single illustrations. I've loved the medium of comics for a long time. I just think it's magical to be able to hold something, and just that medium to me feels like you can just live the story. And just the pure aspect of combining a story plus art and making it to something unique, to me it's incredible, and I always have to remind myself of that whenever I make my own comic. If you've never made a comic before, it can definitely be a vulnerable process, and it's not just with comics specifically, it's just whenever you're building up a new skill, that's when it leaves you more vulnerable. So again, start by making comics for yourself. When you feel more confident in the work that you're making, start sharing it with some people that you trust, and then eventually share it to a much wider audience, such as an online format. If your goal is to make a comic that is so popular online, gives you wealth and fame and fortune, well, it's probably not gonna happen. When I was researching writing a script for this video, I saw on Google that it's estimated that there's 55 million comics posted on Webtoon alone. So popularity is just a small drop in a big bucket of water. Just don't be afraid to make comics that are niche and incredible just for you alone. Others will come and they will enjoy its authenticity. Number 2, start small. I got this tip of starting small back in high school, before I even started art school. One of my teachers in high school liked reading and making comics, and they told me that if I wanted to make comics for a living, I needed to start practicing by starting with bite-sized comics. By starting small, it will then build the skills for you to make something that's much longer. How small are we talking, and how many should you do before you start the big one? Well, there's no answer for that. I got a lot of my training in a sequential narrative class in college. We always started the semester by making a zine. I think zines are a great way to start. All you need is like a tabloid sized piece of paper and a pencil. Or if you want to do it digitally, it's also easily done digitally as well. Can you tell a complete story in just 8 pages? How about just 3 panels? Can you do it wordless? How about all in color? There are so many ways you can practice by doing bite-sized formatted comics. Along with starting small, research other comics and just read. You can learn so much from what's already out there in the world. Number 3, find your own working style. Starting small is also great for discovering your favorite medium to work in, or experimenting with different art styles, or if you want to work with others and collaborate. Your process of how you make comics can change as your skills develop, so don't be afraid to experiment. For example, I started my comic, Dear Samar, by inking traditionally, and then I colored it digitally in Paint Tool SAI with my small dinky plug-in tablet. I never thought I would ever switch over to drawing my comics purely digitally until COVID hit, and then I needed an easier way to submit my sequential narrative homework assignments online. I now work on Procreate on my iPad, and most of my work now is all in digital. But going back to developing skills, I chose to draw Dear Samar in monochrome because I was too scared to color it. It wasn't until college that I discovered that I'm actually pretty decent at picking out color schemes, and I really enjoy working in color. Now, as I'm finishing up my current comic project, my next comic project, I know I want to work in color. I just want to continue developing my skills by working in color and also just have fun with experimenting as I go. Comic making is an incredible medium to collaborate with within the art world, in my opinion. Let's say you're not as strong as a writer. Bam! Ask a buddy who likes to write, ask them to collaborate on a comic project. It also helps reduce the workload to work with someone. But for me personally, I like having all sides of the process of the comic making just to myself, because I'm just very particular about the work that I do. Like, I've always preferred working alone. You may want to work alone too, which is fantastic. Just keep in mind that there's, instead of one skill of developing, which is the art skill, you also have another skill to develop, which is writing skills. Number 4, there's so much more to do before you start making the actual comic. So I discovered this tip personally while making Dear Samar. I started out with some sketches of some characters. I had like a rough outline with some dialogue added to it, and then I just started. I would not recommend this method to anyone. So like the whole reason I thought that I was gonna like finish my webcomic last year is because I just had like my script formatted so badly that I didn't know how many more pages I needed to make. It's just like a big blob of text, and then I kind of figured out what events happened on what page and so on. I don't recommend that to anyone. With my ADHD, I have trouble judging how long a project can take. And so like when I saw my script last year, I was just like, oh yeah, I only have like, I don't know, maybe like 30 pages to do. I can get that done that year. It was more like 100. So yeah, I have a game plan. Properly format your script. Please do that. You should know the art style, the coloring style, locations, characters, world building, even like fonts that you're gonna use for your comic at the very beginning, just like everything before you start penciling that first page. For fantasy and sci-fi stories, you definitely need to make sure that your world building is sound. Your readers are smart, and you just can't half-ass a reason why a world is like that in your story. You need to think it through. All that being said, this will sound contradictory, but don't be afraid to make slight changes while you're making your pages. There's definitely been times when like I rewrote an upcoming scene or changed the location because it just wasn't working. However, if you're making a big change, then start over with the game plan and start the comic over from the beginning. Specifically with your script, I think it's a good idea to have plot landing points rather than it being a very strict one-to-one plot to thumbnail translation. When I was making the thumbnails for my comic, sometimes I discovered that I had to make a change because the sequence of events wasn't working or the location wasn't working. It just didn't fit the art that I needed to do. Text or script is in one format, then art or thumbnails is another format. Comic making is the combination of the both. So sometimes things just get lost in translation between making them into a combined thing. How do you recognize that, when it happens? This took some thinking when I was making my script, and I think there's no real solid answer to this. It just comes down from skill and practice. So another reason why I recommend starting small is that you can just develop the skills and start to recognize when those aspects happen. Number 5, be good with taking a critique and learn when to accept it and when not to accept it. I learned how to develop a thick skin with critiques in art school. I was constantly getting advice and suggestions from others on my pieces, from teachers to my peers, and I had many of the classic stand in front of your artwork and your professor just talks shit about it. There are a few things I learned from this process. The first is that art is always personal. For better and for worse. Again, you should make art for yourself. Talk about the things you want to talk about, but when others are perceiving the work, the viewing of art is also personal to them. It all is based off of their own experience and what they consider as good art. But spoiler alert, there's no such thing as good or bad art. It's just art. When someone is commenting on your work, there is a difference between I hate the backgrounds versus the perspective on this building can be improved on. And one isn't constructive and one is constructive. Ultimately, you are in charge of your own work. You know what you want from it. Be willing to take constructive feedback from others because most of the time it will actually improve your work. But don't be afraid to dismiss feedback if it isn't constructive or if it goes against your vision. For example, in one of my drawing classes, I drew this angelic figure. It was a free theme assignment and I wanted to talk about sin or some shit like that. If you can't tell, it's not my favorite work. So I do like the work though because I learned a lot from it in the process. One of the critiques my professor had was that the drawing could be improved on if I added shading to the wings. On a technical level, yes, that would have improved the drawing. However, I disagree with my professor because it went against my vision of the wings being pure light. So I recognize perspective that my professor gave me, but I didn't apply it because it went against my vision. With another project, it was a 2 groups character design. With it, I had to make 2 vehicles that fit the 2 groups that I was making. At the critique, my professor said it was technically fine drawings, but they were boring. And it wasn't until he said that I realized that he was right and it was boring. I wrote the feedback down and now I have some good advice on how it could become better. Number 6. Know when to say you are finished. This is still the best advice I've gotten in art, for me specifically. My anxiety comes from perfectionism. I get frustrated with my art in high school because I'd want to keep working on a project until it was perfect. But perfect never arrives. My teacher said that there's always more that you can do to improve on in a project. But at some point, you just have to say that you are done and acknowledge that your work is a record of your current skills. In college, one of my professors commendated a past student of his for stopping and restarting the same comic project over and over again to make it better. And I highly disagree with him. It's not healthy to do that. There's just so many changes that I could do with my comic if I just started over, but I'm not going to do that. I have so many more stories I want to write. Each project will be a progression of skills, getting better and better. And I just have to keep making and keep trying with them. And finally, for the love of God, if you're posting your comics online, do try to finish them. This goes back to starting with a bunch of smaller comic projects. If you read comics online, or even fan fiction even, you've probably come across like many projects you've enjoyed and lamented that it's unfinished and updated like 2 years ago. I think the main issue of this specifically is that people like start posting their comics online and it's their very first comic ever, and they don't realize how long it takes to make an actual finished comic. Their first project is way too big for them. But sidebar, if your current comic project is making you unhappy, obviously that's not the goal of art and you should stop. Think of you first. Start small and see if you like making comics, and then try bigger and bigger projects. Summary and conclusion. All right, let's summarize what my tips are. Number 1, make art for yourself, then share with others. Make comics you want to see in the world. Number 2, start small. Practice by making a bunch of small comics to see if you like working in that format. Number 3, learn what's the best way for you to make comics. Everyone's different, and collaborate if you want to. Number 4, there's so much more to do before you start making the actual comic. My God, there's so much more work to do. Number 5, be good with taking a critique and learn when to accept and not accept it. This just comes with practice. Art is very personal and it's a very vulnerable process when you share it online. So take some time for yourself when you're learning to take a critique. Number 6, perfectionism is a false ideal. Keep going and keep experimenting. Finishing projects helps with developing your skills. Comic making is a long and taxing format, so keep in mind your mental health when making them. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. What tips do you have for making comics? If you're interested in reading my comic, it's called Dear Samar, and it's on Webtoon, and that's posted on Tumblr. And then if you want early access to pages, you can head to my Patreon for that. And so the link to all that will be in the description. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you next time.